Imagine you are a marine biologist. You have spent years studying one of the most powerful animals on the planet. You have tagged it, tracked it, and followed its movements across hundreds of miles of open ocean. You believe you understand it. You believe you know what it fears, what it hunts, and what position it occupies in the natural world. Then one morning, you download the data from a recovered tag, stare at your screen, and realize that everything you thought you knew had a gap in it. A gap the size of something enormous. Something that ate your shark. This is not a hypothetical. This happened. And the story of how it happened, what the data revealed, and what it ultimately means for our understanding of the ocean is one of the most extraordinary chapters in the history of marine science. Off the coast of Western Australia in late 2003, a research team was conducting a routine tagging operation on great white sharks. The goal was straightforward: attach sophisticated electronic tags to healthy sharks. Let those tags record movement, depth, and environmental data over several months, and then recover the tags when they automatically detached and floated to the surface. It was standard fieldwork. The technology was reliable. The methodology had been used successfully dozens of times before. One of the sharks they tagged that season was a female, approximately 9 feet long. She was not a juvenile. She was not a small or fragile animal. She was a fully capable predator, feeding regularly, swimming strongly, showing no signs of illness or injury. The researchers fitted her with the tag and released her back into the water. They expected to recover months of clean data about a healthy shark living her life in Australian coastal waters. 4 months later, the tag washed ashore on a beach. The shark was never seen again. When the researchers downloaded the data stored inside that recovered tag, they encountered something they were not prepared for. The readings told a story that had no immediate explanation, and the search for that explanation would reshape how scientists think about predator dynamics in the open ocean. To understand what the data showed, it helps to understand what these tags actually measure. The devices record water temperature, depth, and light levels continuously, creating a detailed log of the conditions surrounding the shark as it moves. When the tag detaches and floats to the surface, it transmits all of that stored information to satellites. Researchers can then reconstruct where the shark went, how deep it dove, and what kind of water it was moving through, all from a small cylinder of electronics that spent months attached to a wild animal. For the first stretch of the recorded period, the data from this particular tag was completely normal. The shark was behaving exactly as expected. She was swimming in water temperatures typical for that region and season. She was making dives consistent with normal hunting and traveling behavior. There was nothing in the data to suggest anything unusual was happening. Then everything changed at once. The temperature reading jumped sharply, rising from roughly 46 degrees Fahrenheit to approximately 78 degrees Fahrenheit in what appeared to be a sudden transition. At almost exactly the same moment, the depth reading began dropping rapidly, showing a fast descent that continued down to nearly 1,900 feet below the surface. The temperature stayed elevated. The depth stayed extreme. And after a period of time that researchers noted was consistent with the duration of passage through a digestive system, the tag was expelled. It eventually made its way to the surface and then to the beach where it was found. The shark had not simply died. She had been consumed. Something had swallowed her, and the tag had recorded the entire event from the inside. The first question the researchers faced was the most obvious one. What could have done this? The temperature data was the critical clue, and it immediately began narrowing the field of candidates. The spike from 46 to 78 degrees almost certainly represented the internal body temperature of whatever had swallowed the tag. This is a crucial distinction because the vast majority of ocean animals are ectothermic, meaning their body temperature matches the water around them. A large fish swallowing the tag would not produce a temperature spike. The water inside its body would be the same cold temperature as the surrounding ocean. The tag would have continued recording 46 degrees or something very close to it. Whatever ate this shark was warm inside. Significantly, measurably warm. That single fact eliminated most of the ocean's predators from consideration immediately. The list of marine animals that maintain internal body temperatures significantly above the water around them is short. Marine mammals, including whales, dolphins, and seals, are warm-blooded in the same way terrestrial mammals are, maintaining internal temperatures in the range of 97 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Certain shark species, including great whites themselves, possess a specialized circulatory structure called the rete mirabile, a dense network of blood vessels that captures and retains metabolic heat generated by muscle activity. This allows these sharks to keep their internal temperatures meaningfully elevated above the surrounding water, which gives them faster reflexes, better cognitive function, and greater swimming endurance in cold conditions. So the predator, it was also large enough to consume a 9-foot shark, capable of diving to nearly 1,900 feet, and apparently unconcerned enough after the attack to make that deep dive while digesting. That profile pointed in two general directions. Either it was an orca, or it was another shark. The orca hypothesis attracted serious attention first, and understandably so. Killer whales are among the very few animals on Earth with documented histories of hunting and killing great white sharks, and the evidence for this behavior is extensive and well established. In South African waters, two male orcas that researchers named port and starboard, identified by the distinctive way their dorsal fins collapsed to opposite sides, became famous for their systematic targeting of great white sharks in the region. The hunting method these orcas used was precise and calculated. They would locate a great white, work together to isolate it, and then flip the shark upside down. When a shark is inverted, it enters a state called tonic immobility, a kind of paralysis that affects many species and renders the animal temporarily helpless. With the shark immobilized, the orcas would open the body cavity and extract the liver, which in a great white can account for nearly a third of the animal's total body weight, and is extraordinarily rich in oils and fats. The orcas would take the liver and leave the rest. The behavioral consequences of orca predation on great white sharks extend well beyond the individual kills. Researchers studying shark movements in South Africa, California, and other regions where both species overlap have repeatedly documented a striking pattern. When orcas arrive in an area, great white sharks leave. They abandon feeding grounds they have used for generations. They do not return until the orcas have moved on. The flight response is rapid, consistent, and dramatic in scale. An apex predator that dominates every other interaction in its environment becomes a fleeing prey animal the moment killer whales enter its vicinity. Despite all of this, the orca explanation for the Australian case fell apart under careful examination. The problems were multiple and significant. The most immediate issue was the temperature reading. Orcas maintain internal body temperatures similar to humans, running between 97 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The tag had recorded 78 degrees. That is a gap of nearly 20 degrees, which is far too large to dismiss as measurement error or biological variation. If the tag had been inside an orca's digestive system, the temperature reading should have been much higher. The depth data created a second problem. While orcas are capable of diving, they typically hunt great whites in relatively shallow, coastal waters where ambush and surface manipulation are possible. A post-attack dive to 1,900 feet does not match the documented hunting behavior of killer whales. The third issue was the consumption pattern itself. Orcas do not swallow great white sharks whole. They extract specific organs and leave the carcass. A tag that had been inside an orca attack should have been expelled quickly, as part of the discarded remains, not retained inside a digestive system for an extended period. The tag data was inconsistent with orca predation across multiple independent lines of evidence. The orca was ruled out. That left the other warm-bodied possibility. Another shark, specifically. The data pointed toward another great white shark, a much larger one. Here's why the numbers align so precisely. A great white shark's internal body temperature typically runs about 25 to 27 degrees Fahrenheit above the temperature of the surrounding water. In water at 46 degrees, that would place a great white's internal temperature somewhere between 71 and 73 degrees Fahrenheit at baseline. The tag recorded 78 degrees. The difference between those figures is consistent with what researchers would expect from a large, active great white that had just expended significant energy attacking and killing a substantial prey animal. Metabolic heat from exertion would elevate the temperature above the resting baseline. The numbers matched, the depth data matched as well. Great white sharks are documented deep divers. They have been recorded at depths exceeding 3,000 feet. A descent to 1,900 feet was well within the species' known capabilities. A large shark making a deep dive after feeding, possibly seeking deeper, darker, quieter water to digest undisturbed, is entirely consistent with known great white behavior. The consumption pattern matched. Unlike orcas with their surgical extractions, a large shark attacking a smaller one would consume the prey in large pieces or whole, keeping the tag inside the digestive system for the kind of extended period the data reflected. The researchers reached a conclusion that was both logical and deeply surprising. The 9-foot female great white shark had been eaten by another great white shark, a significantly larger individual. Based on the data and the physical requirements of what the attack would have demanded, the researchers estimated the predator was somewhere between 16 and 20 feet in length, potentially weighing between 2,000 and 4,000 pounds. An animal of that size and mass would have had no difficulty overpowering and consuming a 9-foot shark. From the larger shark's perspective, the encounter was not remarkable. It was simply feeding. Great white cannibalism was not a completely unknown concept in marine science before this case, but it was largely theoretical and unconfirmed by direct evidence. Cannibalism among sharks as a broader category is well documented. Sand tiger sharks are famous for a behavior called intrauterine cannibalism, in which embryos consume their siblings inside the womb before birth, ensuring that only the most competitive individuals survive to be born. Tiger sharks and bull sharks have been observed preying on smaller sharks of various species in different contexts, but confirmed great white on great white predation was a different matter. The species had been studied extensively for decades. Researchers had tagged them, followed them, filmed them, and analyzed their behavior across multiple ocean basins. The absence of direct evidence for cannibalism had allowed the assumption to persist that adult great whites existed at the absolute top of their food chain, effectively without threat from anything in their environment except, occasionally, AUKUS. The 2003 tag data cracked that assumption open. It provided the first clear instrumental evidence that a great white could be prey for a larger great white. And once that evidence existed, it forced researchers to reconsider what had always been happening out of sight, in deep water, far from any camera or observer. The behavior was almost certainly not new. Large great whites had almost certainly been consuming smaller ones for as long as the species had existed. The ocean had simply never provided a way for humans to see it until a small electronic cylinder was swallowed along with a 9-foot shark and survived to tell the story. The case became widely known through a documentary film that walked viewers through the mystery and the investigation, and it sparked genuine scientific discussion about how researchers think about apex predator status in marine ecosystems. The phrase apex predator carries an implicit assumption that the animal occupying that position has no meaningful threats from predation. It sits at the top of the hierarchy and nothing eats it. The Australian case demonstrated that this framing is too simple for animals like great white sharks. A 9-foot great white is an apex predator in every meaningful sense when it is hunting fur seals along a coastline. Nothing in that interaction is going to challenge or threaten it. But the same 9-foot shark becomes potential prey the moment a 20-foot great white enters the same stretch of water. The category does not change based on the animal's capabilities. It changes based on context, on who else is present, on relative size, and on the specific circumstances of each individual encounter. The ocean operates as a web of relationships rather than a simple hierarchy. Any given animal can occupy multiple positions in that web depending on the situation it finds itself in. The same shark can be predator and prey, not at different stages of its life, but potentially on the same day in the same stretch of ocean, depending entirely on who else shows up. What makes the 2003 Australian case scientifically significant beyond its dramatic qualities is what it revealed about the limits of human observation in marine environments. The ocean covers more than 70% of Earth's surface. The vast majority of it is dark, deep, and completely inaccessible to direct human observation. Behaviors that occur routinely in the open ocean may be entirely invisible to science for decades or centuries, not because they are rare, but simply because no human or human-operated camera has ever been present to witness them. Electronic tagging technology changed the geometry of that problem. It allowed researchers to place instruments into wild animal populations and recover data about behaviors occurring far beyond the reach of any observer. The tag attached to the 9-foot female great white in 2003 did not see what happened to her. It did not record video or audio, but it recorded the data signatures of what happened: the temperature spike, the rapid descent, the prolonged period inside a digestive system, and those signatures were specific enough and consistent enough that researchers could reconstruct the event with reasonable confidence. This is the direction marine biology has been moving ever since. More tags, more sensors, more sophisticated instruments that can record more variables and transmit more detailed data. Each tag deployed on a wild shark represents a potential window into behaviors and interactions that would otherwise be completely hidden. The answers accumulate slowly, one data point at a time, each recovered tag adding another small piece to an enormous puzzle. Researchers studying great white populations in the years since the 2003 case have been working to understand the behavioral implications of large-on-small predation within the species. Do smaller great whites modify their behavior in areas where very large individuals are known to be present? Do they alter their diving patterns, their hunting schedules, or their use of specific locations in response to the threat of cannibalism? The early indications suggest they might. Just as great whites show measurable avoidance behavior when orcas enter an area, there is emerging evidence that smaller sharks adjust their movements in response to the presence of significantly larger conspecifics. This has cascading effects on how the whole population uses its environment. If large great whites create zones of behavioral influence around themselves simply by being present, then the distribution of the species across a given stretch of ocean is not just a function of prey availability or water temperature. It is also a function of where the largest individuals happen to be and how the smaller sharks are choosing to route around them. Population dynamics and habitat use become more complex than any simple model of prey and current would predict. The orcas remain relevant to the broader story even though they were not responsible for what happened in 2003. The documented cases of orca predation on great whites in South African waters represent a real and significant dynamic in that ecosystem, one that has measurably restructured the distribution of great white sharks along portions of the South African coastline. Entire stretches of coast that were once reliable great white habitat have seen dramatic reductions in shark presence in direct correlation with increased orca activity. The sharks have not disappeared from the region entirely, but their relationship to specific areas has changed in ways that researchers are still tracking. What both the orca story and the 2003 cannibalism case point toward is the same underlying truth. The ocean has no permanent, context-independent apex predator. It has multiple powerful predators whose relative dominance shifts based on location, population, individual size, and circumstances that vary constantly. The hierarchy is real, but it is also fluid and situational in ways that static category labels fail to capture. The 9-foot female great white tagged in Western Australia in late 2003 was, by any reasonable measure, an impressive animal. She was healthy, well-fed, strong, and capable. She was doing everything correctly for a young great white navigating her environment. She was not prey in any categorical sense. She was simply, on a particular day in a particular stretch of deep water, smaller than something else that was hungry. Her tag recorded what happened to her. The data was clear, even when the explanation was not immediately obvious. And the process of working toward that explanation, ruling out orcas, identifying the temperature signature of another great white, considering the depth and consumption patterns, all of it added up to a finding that changed how marine biologists understand the species they had been studying for generations. She was not special in the sense of being unusual. She was simply the one whose death left evidence. Somewhere in the waters off Western Australia, the animal that ate her is almost certainly still alive, still hunting, still occupying a position near the top of a food chain that includes other great white sharks among its potential prey items. The data proved it happened. The research that followed confirmed it was not a fluke, and the ocean, indifferent as always to human categories and assumptions, continues operating by its own rules, rules that we are still in the early stages of learning to read.